It's 4 p.m.
Hello, right on time today.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? And how's the audio quality?
I can hear you and you sound just fine. So let's just wait another minute or two to see who else is joining us. But I think we should start with you presenting today. You have something ready for a few minutes, right?
Yes, a few minutes. So I'll be, I'll do this as quickly as possible so that you can go on with your topics.
Oh no, this is absolutely the whole point of this, for you to come and do this. We don't have any specific long-term ongoing other topics. So no.
All right. Well, I mean, I have some general remarks and then I go a bit into details and then we can see whatever perhaps fits into the community, because that whole topic of infrastructure, it's really huge, and so guess we have to focus here a bit, and so it would be good to find that out with you, what would be the best approach in the future.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself in general? Where are you located and so on? And what?
Oh. I'm from Austria, Wiener Neustadt. It's a small town in the south of Vienna, and I studied computer science, and it was only after my.
Thank you all for joining us for this special webinar.
Oh, sorry, hang on. What's going on?
I'm Philip Diamond. It gives me great pleasure as director of the Royal
Astronomical. There is a video that was queued up. The Royal Astronomical Society is making a major announcement now. I'll put it back on quiet.
Say a little bit about the Royal Astronomical.
No, that's fine. Which kind of announcement?
Yeah, I have no idea what it is. It'll be interesting to see what it is.
Yeah, well, now you made me curious. I looked that up after our meeting.
I'll send you both the link. Hi, David. I see you are here too.
Yeah, Dave is on his way too.
Good. We just had a voice come in here. Gunther was introducing himself, and then actually, how do you pronounce your name? I'm sure I did that completely wrong.
Yeah, no, it's completely right.
Oh, it's fine. Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, it's really not much to tell. So, when I did my thesis and it was in operating systems, I began to think, well, how do you deal with all the knowledge and so many publications, and what do you do? And only years later, I discovered that actually there's an entire field, multiple fields, but hypertext concerns itself with these questions. And it's unfortunate that at university we didn't have much exposure to the history of computing, and so I had to rediscover many things on my own, and and then I, of course, I'm very fascinated by Ted Nelson's research, and of course all the research done in the early 60s and 70s. So and this is what I've been following up, and so that's about it. So there's not more to say, but I think when I give the short presentation, maybe of some more ideas on what my interests are, and how I can perhaps contribute in whatever way suitable.
Mm-hmm. Good. Nice to meet you. And as we agreed last Friday, it would be nice if you do a little presentation before we get back to our ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell the two Davids that the reason I put a link in the chat was there was a sound in the background. The Royal Astronomical Society is making some kind of an announcement here. So that's just, I don't know. If something comes up on the screen, we'll all have to look at it, but I doubt it's a matter of alien life, rather alien intelligent life, considering we don't have much intelligence on this planet at the moment either.
Right, to quote Einstein.
Yes. Gunther, you want to share screen, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I start with sharing my screen. I mean, I don't know whether the slides might be way too big, so let's see. Well, host disabled participant screen sharing. Is that something that you have to enable, or no? That's
like that, but under
that's my problem.
Yeah, he's got to just click something.
Yeah, no, it's under security, and I have given you access now. I apologize. I forget to do that on this.
Okay, that's great. Just one second, please. Where did I put this? Oh, the problem is that. Let's see how this works. So might be. So you see my screen, but
No.
Not yet, no.
Oh, okay. Oh, here it is.
Oh, wow.
Just.
So I just got a message from the New York Times, and this is what they're saying in the video. Astronomers have found potential sign of life on Venus.
Wow.
Venus.
Are you kidding me?
That's, yeah, click on that link and you can see them live. There you go. Explaining what they're talking about. That's,
Huh.
Oh.
Well, that sort of verifies, I mean, when you have living organisms in those sulfur pits or whatever down at, you know, some of the places that bacteria survive, it's
Yeah.
very inhospitable. So why not Venus, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Let's try not to get too excited, but
yeah,
crazy. Okay, Günther, are you able to share screen? I think I've given you permission. Oh, here we go. Okay, excellent.
I don't know what you're seeing. Oh God, I'm sorry. This is the first time I'm actually. Can you see my entire screen and how?
Yeah, there's a green box in the top left-hand corner, but it looks like
yeah. Okay. The question is, how can I move it? Can I make the box larger somehow? Huh.
Why don't you stop sharing and start again? Maybe you click on a different size.
Yeah. That would be best. So let's try it again.
The top left one is usually full screen sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's probably better. Okay.
There we go.
Now I have two desktop sections, and this is a bit of a complication. So I'm sorry for showing our email
No, that looks good. Now I think we can see the whole screen. You guys can see
you're
it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So slides might be a bit too big, but let's see how we do this. Well, there's a presentation mode that I can't find, but when can you read the text at all? Then
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, good. Well, so actually, this talk is about hypertext and about hypertext infrastructure. I mean, these two are very huge topics, and I just want to give you a short overview on what my thoughts on this topic are and what my understanding of hypertext is, so that I know whether we are on the same page. And some viewpoints might be perhaps a bit off, and feel free to challenge me and to correct me. And much of this is motivated by Fode's paper, the last Blue Sky paper that he wrote on hypertext infrastructure, and where he mentions that today actually we don't have a blue sky anymore, so we have lots of different kinds of systems, and we need ways to interact with these systems, and this will be certainly one of the big challenges in the coming years of hypertext research. And I thought about it a bit, and at the end of the topic I will go into an idea that Fode presented, the augmented clipboard, and how we could advance this idea. And so first of all, I mean, I have to apologize. I know it's perhaps getting a bit tedious, but I know this question has been raised many times. So also on the last conference, there was this big question mark. So what is hypertext actually? And as you know, there are many, many definitions, many viewpoints. So according to Ted Nelson, it would be paraphrased Ted Nelson, anything that cannot be conveniently presented on paper. There are some reductionistic definitions such as hypertext as nodes and links. And then we might go into great detail what could be, what is in a node, what is in a link, what kind of link types are there. And there's a lot of research done and still being active research being done in semantic networks. And I think you get into a whole lot of semantic traps, and hypertext is just this big idea. And I'm sure you're aware with, you know, about the fable of the blind researchers and the elephant. And we just get a glimpse of that idea. And to me, at some point, I stopped and I asked myself, in particular regarding to infrastructure, what is this really about? And you might not agree with it, but these are the things that the activities that I came up with. So to me, hypertext is an activity, it's process oriented. It's mainly about forming relationships between anything you can virtually think of, people, digital artifacts, systems, components, and this makes the field very, very complex. And we might ask ourselves, well, what kind of relationships are we talking about? And I think for my research, I want to focus on equivalence relations, so that we can have some measure on what is actually which research ideas, which artifacts, objects, anything you can think about are the same according to some criteria, and what is different, which I think is also important in the future for consolidating research. So there is an exponential publication activity, and especially in computer science, we have so many new ideas, and the question, of course, is immediate. So what exactly are these ideas about, and how can I make sense of this? Also respecting the roots of hypertext, tracing back the roots to 1945 at least, to Weaver-Bush essay on, as we may think, it's also about augmenting memory. We have many methods such as associative trains, annotations, spatial relationships, and now there's an increased interest in implicit hypertext if you follow Klaus Atzenbeck's work. And ultimately, I think it's also about the indeterminate, the ever-changing, which is which hints at Ted Nelson's early first paper on hypertext, which he published in 1965, where he presented his evolutionary file structure to cover the many the complex process of writing. So I also ask myself, what is it not about? And this might be controversial, but I don't think it's about a specific technology such as recommender systems, even machine learning and artificial intelligence. I mean, those things are very important for doing hypertext research, and hypertext can provide insight into these fields. But I think perhaps one should be careful not to let one of the things define what hypertext should be about. So just think about the next AI winter. So what impact would that have for the community? Okay, so now here's a bit of a bump. The next, so what do you mean by infrastructure? Since I'm talking about hypertext infrastructure, and well, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, infrastructure provides the resources required for an activity. we can think about many activities in hypertext systems. I think one key point is that well-developed infrastructure is hardly noticeable and almost taken for granted. For instance, garbage disposal, irrigation, sewage networks, electricity, everything that we use for our daily lives. Yeah, we kind of hardly notice and take for granted, and this might be a problem when doing research in infrastructure because it's not a hot topic. It's difficult work. It involves a lot of grunt work also, and so funding might be an issue. And we might then ask ourselves, well, what is hypertext infrastructure, and what's the state of our hypertext infrastructure, if there is one, and then we might ask the question, well, how does our infrastructure support hypertext activities, and where are barriers and obstacles? And well, once you see our computer systems and the way we work with our computer systems through the lens of hypertext, I'm sure you begin to notice that there are problems, that there are barriers. I just picked up 3 technical issues that you are certainly aware of, but that are not really discussed enough, in my opinion. And that's one is the application model. Has been criticized by Ted Nelson, also by Alan Kay. One problem is that we can't compose application. There is duplication of effort, missing functionality. Already there's a huge variety of different kinds of applications. Office suites, clipboard manager that I'm using, and there are just too many options, too many tools which do the same tasks, and improving on these applications, which are undoubtedly part of our infrastructure, might be costly. So we have to be aware about this issue and think about which applications, if at all, we should focus on improving. Another big issue, I think, is that memory models, the memory architectures are very crude. Memory is a very complex topic. It's actually a process. None of the memory architectures that we use have any working understanding about cognition. And we also have the problem that once we want to persist state, which is important if you think about doing an experiment and showing it to somebody else, or you work on something and 5 years later, you want to know, to be remembered on what you were working about. So that's an issue, because right now the application layer has to take care about persisting state, and doesn't really work that well. And in my opinion, this is a matter of infrastructure, and there are in fact systems that in which you don't have to worry as much about this issue, such as Smalltalk systems or Lisp machines that can make snapshots of their own state. Another issue, another issue is programming.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
How many more slides have you got, just to make sure we have some time to talk as well?
Yeah, just a few slides. And be as quick as possible. Programming methods and languages. Main problem is that that we have to deal with changing assumptions, changing environments. Programming languages and methods can't deal with that very well. We have academic issues. I won't go into that. So the question is, of course, given the many problems, do we start from scratch, or do we improve on our existing infrastructure? Both paths can be taken. When improving infrastructure, what underlies for this idea is to look at hubs of activities in our computer systems, and then improve on these parts, for instance, the clipboard filing systems, net interfaces. And one idea that fully presented is the augmented clipboard, and this is just a very crude picture of this. So it's actually, this is part of, these are my clipboard contents, and it would be, I think, really helpful to have a system that comes up with relevant interconnections and even presents to you related artifacts such as publications, or even infers from the contents that this is actually a reference to publication. And if it is stored in my system somewhere else, such as you might also see then the entire paper. And you might also see all kinds of other visualizations depending on what's on your clipboard. The way this could work, I'm sorry, is that, and I can only sketch that very roughly, I'm sorry, is that we have various means, heuristics and parsers and services that can make sense of the artifacts and of different kinds of file formats that are and languages that are encoded in the clipboard, and then come up with means to present the information, or even suggest annotations and links. And these components, they shouldn't be hardwired together, because then we'll run into all sorts of integration problems, but should actually part of some kind of propagation network in which information is exchanged, and the services have to somehow find themselves, which is an active research interest of mine, and I'm working on this. Yeah, so I also looked up at what kind of research work might be important for doing this clipboard, and yeah, I came up with a few interesting approaches. And yeah, so I'll stop here, and maybe, yeah, we can have a short discussion. Yeah.
I have an initial question, and that is, you know, related to everyone here. What is the workflow you would like to support? Doug Engelbart, of course, he famously talked about views and navigation, rather jumping.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily the architectural issues, because he felt that was what the user needed. What is it that you want users to be able to do in this environment that cannot easily be done now?
I think it's an interesting question. Well, you see, I think one of the issues is that I think discussions having, so there's a lot of work in argumentative reasoning, and I tend to read a lot of publications in different kinds of fields, and I'm already having troubles keeping track of this work. And whenever I have a discussion with someone, then I know, well, here is something that I read in a paper, but right now I can't think of it. And what at least what I want to do is to support recall. I think this is very important. This is also why, I mean, the clipboard manager, for instance, here, which I am using, has many useful kinds of information. It also contains even things like shell commands that I use, or even quotations. And I don't want to work in many different kinds of environment. I just want to look up the information, or perhaps type in a few sentences, and the system would come up with all relevant information that I collected. So this is something that, yeah, I think could be useful.
I guess David and David have, actually, do you prefer Dave and David, or how do you differentiate?
So he's Dave and I'm David. That's what we've.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that makes sense. Either one of you have any questions or comments, considering this is kind of in our general space?
Well, I'll just go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead.
Well,
I was thinking from the programming side. As a programmer, I look at these. So first comment was in articulating the pain. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, it's that I have acquired a piece of information,
Yes.
and there is a lot of implicit linkage
Mhm.
that is not explicitly accessible.
Yes.
And all of the extra work that I have to do to trace the implicit references or the knowable linkage, right? Things I can know, like a title of a book is an ISBN, is a link to
Yeah.
a very specific PDF, et cetera, also has a number of authors associated with it. That the fact that I have a piece of information and what's knowable isn't right at my fingertips is the source of the pain. And so I'm required, because of the way the information's structured, or the lack of structure, or the lack of interpretation, the machine not interpreting it in a way that adds that knowable structure, leaves me having to chase these things through myriad ancillary programs, other
Yes.
programs, in order
Yes.
to try to resolve these things. Why isn't my system helping me better? I think that was the first thought. Is that a clear articulation?
Thank you. That's one big problem. Yes.
Okay. And then the second part for me is like, so as a programmer,
Yes.
for the last 25 years, I've been watching people attack this generic problem at the systems level
Mhm.
from from a bunch of different directions. Like it's getting attacked over and over and over. And the problem is that any way you try to solve the problem, any frame that you use or point of view that you use
Yes.
to attack this problem offers certain affordances and certain lacks, right? It offers you things that it enables, but it also at the same time, there are other capabilities or things you'd like. Because like part of what you're talking about there, for example, is to articulate a data abstraction or a set of linking abstractions. And if you look at the original, definitions of XML and all of the work that's been done by the W3C, there's intent to have accomplished this at the data level in encoding in text. But there are these problems with that. And you see other people come along like Rich Hickey and Closure, talking about Eden. I forget something data notation, but it's a text notation for data. And he tried to address some of the limitations of those data structures in text. JavaScript with JSON has limitations in that you can't actually encode object type data and provide extensions. And there's been work done to try to address that. So, I mean, this is a huge problem, and in a broader sense at the computing level, let alone at the level of the individual users themselves. So those were my thoughts. This is not a small topic.
No, but these are exactly the problems. Yes, and you see, I know. I mean, as you said, there are many attempts to find, let's say, the right kind of data structure and right kind of representation, but just doesn't exist. So the only thing I think that can be done reasonably is to consolidate the processes that we have and integrate them in a way such that whatever kind of object, in which way it might be encoded, I give into the system, it would come up with possible interpretations. I mean, I don't think that this can be completely automated, and also it has to be done first. I have to do it with my data first. But I think, it's the only way to attack this problem, because, as you said, every time you make some assumptions about encoding and so forth, then at some point you'll run into problems. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to shoot in here, and we've taken, no, we're good, is can you go back a few slides, the one where you had the clipboard diagram?
Yeah, sure. Here it
Because
is.
I think that's what this one, yeah, I think this is what kind of hopefully unites us all. The way that when you go into a author document, you click on a citation and then you copy citation. So what it does is produce pretty much exactly this. It either just copies the BibTeX formatted citation information or text associated with it if it is there. But you have an expanded clipboard where you have other clever bits that can be on there, but they're on there in an open fashion so that different services can read them, I think is truly at the very heart of the infrastructure you're talking about. The implementations you talk about on the next slides are, just like Dave said, huge and interesting. But this is the stuff I think we can work on now. How would a highlighter work with this? Can we copy in and out of your environment in such an augmented manner?
Not currently, no. But
So,
I don't.
yeah.
I'm hoping there's an ellipsis there.
So what I haven't explored is the idea of, because, so I have to look a little more closely at the clipboard technology, because what he's displaying here, I don't know that this is an accurate representation of what programmatically ends up on the clipboard. One of the interesting things that that Microsoft did with Windows in the original implementations is that they had the idea of one or more associated flavors or data types. I think Java took on some of that also when that started interacting with the clipboard. But the idea that the same content that had been put on the clipboard had a text representation, an HTML representation, and perhaps an RTF representation, and that all three were somehow accessible from what had been placed on the clipboard.
Yeah,
right?
That's what we take advantage of, exactly that.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing. But the problem with that is that it doesn't actually, unless you also have an abstraction that is amenable to storage, the memory system is, you know, like, so you've got to run a pretty complex database. So the brain solved this problem, right? I collect information through a variety of senses, and it all ends up inside of my decision-making framework, accessible and open to these symbol manipulations that are behind words, right? I mean, that's the way we think about it. I don't know that that's actually, you know, actually what's happening, but, you know, so I can think of the word car, and there's a whole host of associated pieces of experiential data in my mind that get, you know, that get triggered. But it doesn't matter which sense that data came from. Some part of my brain is able to, you know, take that set of abstractions and bring it together and reference it in, you know, as a single item. In our system, as we're collecting these things that come through the clipboard, and when you talked about the idea of memory systems and, or memory is about tracking state, which is change over time. And when you do that, you know, I can't have, well, I can have 30 different databases storing information in 30 different ways. The question is, how do they communicate and how do they share information such that I can do, you know, such that I can actually look across the entire data set and do decision making or searching and surfacing information from any of those sources. So you either abstract to a single representational structure that's used for indexing, or you maintain multiple structures based on the idea that there are, you know, so you reify that data into multiple backend systems based on how I would want to access that information. Because if I'm going to, if for example, with this link there about the book on the clipboard representation, if I want to give you all of these details about Douglas DeShow, right, what am I interacting with? Am I interacting with DBpedia? Am I interacting with, you know, somebody's LDAP system that has all this information about him? Where's that data coming from? And that problem is part of this also. I don't know if I'm making that sense.
You're making
sense there.
a lot of sense, and I'd like to address that by pointing out the importance of publishing, because that means freezing. And in Doug Engelbart's system, you know, he had the journal. A lot of rich, wild, crazy stuff like you're doing, brilliant stuff, but at a certain time, you have to put a foot in the ground or a stake in the ground or whatever and say, here is the version.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, that's why I decided to love PDFs. It's only a part of the story. It's a very shallow part of the story, but it is a thing that exists and we don't have to worry about what you're talking about. So I'm wondering if using, staying with Highlighter, if you can copy in and out, but you do it from a published stage, as you might call an abstraction. I don't know, what do you think? Because in general, I think this is very interesting.
So I really like that idea. So one of the fundamental concepts is point at, point of, right? We talked about that on Friday, briefly. I mentioned that thought. And one of the fundamental parts for me to get to that observation was it's really difficult to point at something that's changing, right? So the word you're using is publish. The word I would use is static, right? Meaning that it's immutable. I think immutability in programming, I think about this in terms of immutable data structures, because an immutable data structure can't be changed underneath me. And so I can do reliable calculation based on the thing I'm looking at. And in Highlighter, the documents that we bring into the system are in fact immutable and they're treated as such. It doesn't mean somebody can't publish a new version of that document that has different information. But if I engage in any pointing at, highlighting of the document, I know that the document I come back to is the one that was pointed at.
Yeah.
And so what I'm pointing at is in fact what you pointed. What I'm looking at is what you pointed at.
This is key. This is so super exciting that it's ridiculous, because I think that from what Gunter's been talking about today and what you guys talking about, what we're dealing with is the notion of addressability, as we talked about last time. You know, you can walk down the street and you can say, I'm going to 45 Greenwich Grove or whatever. That's one way of addressing. You can also say, go down and take a left by the red car. That's a temporary, implicit, relative addressing. Right? So if we can build affordances for different ways of addressing, because when you're saying something that is in motion, then yes, it gets complicated because you have to reconstruct what that motion was at that point. So that's more a matter of, I guess you could call it dimensions or attributes or whatever. But if we start solving these issues as a community, then we can start building incredible interactions where Highlighter is the place to go and do what you're doing with helping students see and highlight. But then they can go into a different space and continue.
Yes.
So if I just jump in here. So I'll go back to a question that you asked Gunther Frode, which is, you know, what do you want to accomplish, right? So the starting idea for Highlighter is sort of the quintessential problem of the digital age, which is you have access to all this information on a topic, just overwhelming amounts. How do you get at the good stuff and process it in a way that it becomes usable knowledge, which means you somehow have connected information to what you already know in your head to then produce something of value. And what's interesting, I'll send you guys a link to the demo that Chris North did for us. And I edited it down from an hour to it's only like 15 minutes. And he showed us 2 applications that he's developed. And one of them is, or they both involve, in a way, address some of the problems that Gunther is talking about. They involve small AI for small amounts of data, which is sort of a big emerging application of AI. Instead of having millions of documents that you're processing, people are saying, oh, no, we need to be able to have AI work with small amounts. And what his program, his team at BTU has been doing is this thing he calls incremental formalism, where the machine observes an analyst searching for documents, opening documents, annotating, and over time, the machine builds an interest model of, you know, what are the kinds of things that the analyst seems to be exploring and spending time on. And then they use this thing he calls semantic interaction to present a screen, a visualization that shows, here's the stuff you've opened in the last session, and in the background are recommended documents that are relevant to the things that you're looking at now or have been looking at over the past whatever period of time. And I think what's so interesting to Dave and me when we see this, and it's also, you know, I talked to somebody in the intelligence community that had a similar reaction, is, okay, great, you've just recommended, here's 20 documents that are relevant to what I'm interested in. But sense making doesn't happen at the document level. It happens at the fragment or idea level, right? Mm-hmm. And the machines aren't that, you know, the machine can go in and do entity extraction and show you, here's hundreds or even thousands of instances of the concepts and people and places and things that you're interested in. But now you're back into the information overload problem. So what Highlighter is about is trying to point at specific ideas that are relevant to the ideas that you're working with. And just to go back to Gunther's frustration, the problem that this technology is trying to address is, how can you support analysts who are doing creative synthesis with a foraging system that's supported by the machine so as not to interfere with the flow of the analyst, right? So you're into making sense and things are flowing, and now you've got to stop and go look for stuff because you have a gap or you need to elaborate. And so can the machine come in and assist to make this a more seamless process? Or that's what they're trying to solve. But you know, again, if you're not down at the fragment level, then okay, great, you gave me an article, it's 60 pages long. Now I've got to find what's relevant. So to the extent that we're looking at how you could use Highlighter to inform the machine sufficiently so that the machine could start doing what looks like reading, like in the way that the analyst or the researcher would be reading. I'll stop there.
Interesting.
What is the point of the hypertext? You know, so just the last thing I'll just throw in is that this guy that was quick anecdote, he was the supervisor of the only team in the CIA that said Saddam does not have weapons of mass destruction, and here's why. And but at any rate, what he said when he saw Highlighter is, oh, I get it. This is the now what, so what, and answer to the question, because the machine is saying, here you go, visualizations, lots of documents. What are you going to do with them? Because that's not where the sense making and the learning happens, right? It's at the level of processing pieces of information, linking them to what you already know at a more atomic level. And this is where Dave's conversation model comes in. So so when you're talking about hypertext, all right, you want to link all this stuff, but to what purpose? To create some kind of structure in your head that you can now do something with all these pieces of information. And then again, going back to Gunther's observation, over time, you want to be able to keep a sort of a running tab on what have I learned so far, and how can I go back in and review it and update what I know and so forth. And that's what Highlighter is enabling through these high trails, which are, by the way, Highlighter is hypertext plus highlighter pen. That's what it's, you know, so it definitely harps back to the Memex and to Vanover and Ted Nelson and Doug and so forth. We just don't talk about hypertext much.
Yeah, it's funny how the term itself has fallen out of fashion.
Yeah.
It's quite odd indeed.
I mean, hypertext, like, just when I look back at what was happening, it's this idea that, oh, that word means something and it references something. Well, over there, I've got a document that talks about the thing this is referencing. Why can't I get there from here? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But what this is pointing at more generically is the idea of having information that's presented to us linked in a way that is analogous to what we're trying to actually do inside of our minds, which is to create those associations, right? Why do I have to go find Ted Nelson? Why can't I click and get the information the system has about Ted Nelson? Why can't I, there he is, right? If I think the word Ted Nelson in my mind, boom, this network of neurons fires, right? If I've loaded that up by all these perceptual, interactions, if I think about Ted Nelson, it fires. And I think about the sun, I think about all these things that have happened, these experiences, right? Why is it that when I look at the text on the page, what the universe knows about Ted Nelson isn't available to me, right?
Yeah, I would call that a navigation issue because, I mean, Ted Nelson, for me, is also a close personal friend. So it could mean, when we were talking about sitting in the kayak in California, it could mean when he was doing this with, so there are so many dimensions to, what is relevant and also what would spark it.
Yeah.
An annoying aspect of Ted can also quite easily spark.
Well, this is I think this is an important aspect. One of the things I've thought about humor a lot, jokes, and I think it's like one of the most important things in humor is is flipping the context like that on you and throwing you into a what, and it recontextualizes the whole story. And the way that I always say it is, if I tell you a story about the sun, oh, this might be too English based, but I don't know. So if I tell you a story about the sun and the moon, and then in the middle of the discussion, you realize I'm talking about my male child, okay? All of a sudden you realize that the moon I was referring to was him exposing his butt to the neighbor, right? And it's right, I've immediately recontextualized the two words.
Yeah.
And serendipity, when Dave and I talk a lot about serendipity, or where is that undiscovered epiphany or that aha moment, it's almost never in seeing a thing you've never seen. It's in seeing something through the wrong lens, seeing something you've seen before through a lens you've never looked through. Right, I'm over here looking at the math for fluid dynamics, and then I'm over here looking at traffic patterns, and all of a sudden I realize that the math applies to both. Right, now I can apply this math over here, and all of a sudden I have insights about traffic on roads that I've never had before. Anyway, I feel like I got us off track of where we were going. But
no, I don't think you did at all.
Okay.
When you're talking about that, I've been working on a paper or an aspect of my paper where I'm saying that academia today, because of bullshit citation systems, are favoring people on a different part of the spectrum than where I am. I'm a non-detail oriented, kind of creative, fluid kind of a guy. I think very differently. Citation systems force you to be interested in the details and database stuff. So I think what you're talking about in terms of how it fits mentalities of people is quite important. How it allows them to think through systems.
So can I just jump in with two things? One is we had wanted Frode to talk to you about UX issues because of how looking at what you've built and thinking about it in relationship to Highlighter. So I just put that aside, and then I want to go back to something Gunther said in his presentation, which is, well, he used the example of doing research on hypertext. and how he's accumulating all this knowledge, and then how do you keep track of it and so forth, right? And then how can you have a system that could help you to fill in the gaps? And so this is what I only recently came to, and I would like to get both your opinion and Gunther's. In creating a high trail, what I'm doing is I'm taking high value fragments from many documents with my comments and putting them in this right margin, the high trail, with links back to where they came from. And then I'm spending hours rearranging the pieces into a narrative structure. So I'm doing this frame building with the snippets, the highlights, and my commentary. And as I go down through the high trail, I especially focus on adjacent highlights. What comes next? And I think about coherence. Does what's in slot 4 follow from slot 3? Would somebody be able to follow this as a storyline? Does the jump that I just made make sense? And if not, I pull something out and put something else in. And so what occurred to me is, okay, right now I have a high trail of about 150 highlights on this topic of related to, started with Chris North's research and brought in highlighter related stuff and so forth. And it's produced a lot of ideas for me and insights. And one of the ideas was, okay, the machine can construct an interest model based on what am I reading now? What did I read before? What did I annotate? What did I search? Might the machine be able to construct a frame building model based on analyzing these adjacent highlights? And if, for going back to the example of I'm doing research on hypertext, I have this storyline of snippets from the 200 documents I've read so far, and I've got 200 snippets here arranged in an order that tells a story. Could the machine construct the underlying framework that is sort of emerged as I create in creating this high trail is reflecting the frame building model that's in my head? Could the machine somehow construct that and use it to help fill in missing information, to make those links, not to documents as a whole, but to actual sentences, fragments, whatever, inside of documents that would help to either fill in missing information or provide alternative perspectives on things that I'm thinking about that are in the high trail. So that's and you know, I mean, it is a new idea, I think, for a data source for training machines to think like humans, right? Or to create a bridge between the machine and human. And then, of course, if you had the frame building model of a superior thinker within a domain, could other people use that model to elaborate on their inquiry process in a way that would deliver not just documents, but those fragments that might have high value when integrated into your emerging story? Thoughts?
Yeah, just a brief one for me before Gunther jumps in. I'm not really an AI kind of or ML person. I think it definitely can be useful.
You're fine, babe.
Oh, sorry, there's some weird sound. It's probably here. Anyway, sorry. But the whole idea of semantic markup and semantic groupings in documents is definitely important. Just a simple thing, even with author, I'm going to try to have headings be less of headings and more of a kind of a pill thing. So that's my tiny little detail. Gunther, we can finally see you.
Yeah. No, so I decided to stop screen sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you have any comments on what David was talking about?
Oh, well, to be honest, I don't know when I'm qualified to, because it seems to me like a very complex issue. But my question is, what about human collaboration? So, I mean, when I follow your trail, and I might be able to suggest alternatives. So I think the question would be, how much machine learning actually do we need, and to which degree or should we in some parts it might be perhaps advisable to use human collaboration, especially if you have
let me just,
many.
yeah, no, that's a right on target, because what I'm about to do is share my high trail with about 15 other people, right? And I'll see how many of them are willing to make their way through.
Yes.
And then we have a methodology for how they can say, hey, David, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And then I would have the choice to say, oh, that's really relevant. I'm going to add a piece of that into my storyline, or I'm going to update. So yes, the idea of the machine aspect is that I could open up exploration to big data, to the overwhelming amount of information that's out there. Because even with a dozen people, I'm still having a relatively small sample. Still might be adequate, or might be rich enough, and we'll find out. But yeah, yeah, Dave.
If I may, there's a piece for that Dave and I have talked about, I've thought about, I wrote about it in a couple places, is this idea that, you know, human technology is slowly moving through this progression of augmenting our natural abilities. And it starts with a stick that allows me to hit with a greater amount of force. And it moves into our physical machines that allow us to, create effects that require strength a human being doesn't have. But with the appearance of stuff like an abacus and writing, you start to externalize the human cognition, right? You start to be able to do calculation outside the human mind and engage in calculation beyond that, which we're normally able to do. But when computers appear on the scene, calculators like actually are happening digitally, and then we start to create memory, and we start to do processing and calculation with large amounts of data. The next problem that you have is indexing and communication. Okay, so where do I find the information, and how do I share it, get it to another location so that it can be used where it's needed? With the internet, and then with the search engine companies, the indexing and the accessibility is there. What's next? And the next thing the machine can start to do is the frame building piece, which is what we do. That's the real thing where humans are still, can the machine begin to assist us at this making sense of the information? Because like David said, over and over in these large data scenarios, it's now what, so what? Like, I've got the data, now what do I do, right? And so for me, I'm always thinking about this from the aspect of how can I continue to push the boundaries of how the machine assists me and represents an augmentation of my capabilities, right? And so the stuff David was talking about is really about, we've found with companies we've talked to that machine intelligence algorithms can do some pretty amazing things. One, for example, around natural language has to do with zip distribution, which it turns out that English words in use follow a natural distribution of frequency. And it turns out that if you have an overall example of the natural distribution of a language, and then you take a specific document and you get the zip distribution for that document, you can find out what's actually appearing out of in a frequency that's different from the natural distribution. And it suggests that those terms are the relevant terms that the document's about. Yeah. What an interesting thing to be able to do. Very so cool. It's pushing these capabilities in really interesting ways where we start to go, oh, maybe what the human brain's doing isn't quite as inscrutable as we think, right? Maybe it's actually, there's some things we can do. And so that's an interesting part for us also.
Just running a bit low on time.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No, don't be sorry. That was hugely valuable and fascinating. I'm sorry for the timing. I just wanted to say that personally, though, I think there's a very big difference, and I know it's obvious, between applications and infrastructures. I would be very happy to talk to you guys in these sessions or outside about the application, interactions, all that stuff. It's hugely important. However, I really think that we're at a stage now where the infrastructure of how we share is crucial, because we don't have an ecosystem yet. We can't have a Cambrian explosion if we're not in the same ocean.
I really appreciate that statement.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't think it happened like that, but if we can think more and have a future session on what it would mean to go in and out of Highlighter, I would really like that. My dearest friends, Doug and Ted, for different reasons, have had problems with this. They created incredible worlds, and in Doug's case, he created it before anyone else, but he didn't keep up with how to integrate. Ted, with his different world genius, doesn't kind of see how his things can fit. So there's no input and output in a sense. I think that's not good.
And we have given a lot of thought to that in and out piece. The thing that, just as a second agenda item, is, you know, when we looked at your work and we look at Highlighter, which, by the way, we had very professional high-end design help with that, right? A guy who's nationally known for developing interfaces for search engines and done, but as Dave put it, it's more instructivist in philosophy, and your approach is more constructivist. It's relying more on inside the person's head instead of what's on the screen. And when we look at your interface and look at ours, we all of a sudden we're saying, well, gee, we got a lot of information that you really don't need to look at all the time. It's kind of a distraction. And so that's the most obvious message when you look at your interface. It's like, you know, you only have what you need at the moment, not a lot of extraneous. And so we wanted to, you know, maybe explore with you, you know, what our UI UX might look like with that philosophy applied, still with the same, you know, set of affordances, but with this very clean, elegant way of getting into it.
Yeah, that sounds good. If you could please put together a presentation for me of the specific things you would like to discuss, then we can schedule some time to do exactly that. And now I've got a message about my next meeting.
Okay, that'd be great.
Email me, tweet me, or whatever medium you want, and I'll be here again on Friday. Gunther, it was very nice to see the beginnings of your work. I hope to see more.
Thanks for the opportunity. And
is this room going to shut down as soon as you leave, Frode?
No, it's not. Do you guys want to chat a bit more?
I would like to say a couple more things to Gunther if I could.
Yeah, that's great.
Is it Gunther or Gunter? Yeah.
I'm going to stop this end, and you guys have fun. Sorry, it's not even a, you know, it's my family obligations. I've got to.
Yes.
First things first.
Completely no. I have the same at my 4 o'clock. Yeah. Okay. So is it Gunther or Gunter?
It's Gunther, but both is fine. So it's,
okay, well, I'll go with Gunther. That's my instinct says to say it that way.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just wanted to offer some recommendations in terms of places to look and things to think about. I don't know how much experience you have with the breadth and the wealth of stuff that's been done within programming. I see the references to, I think it was Smalltalk. I heard you reference lists. But like there are a lot of pieces that have been developed, whether as specifications or as implementations. They could be data, standards for stuff like XML and XML SN with the the notation language for schema notation. But there are other standards that have been made out there. But there's also systems that have been built with specific paradigms in mind. Are you familiar with triples, triple notation?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, figuring out ways to abstract the information, there are a bunch of pieces to solve the problem you specifically were talking about that are out there. They're just not necessarily composed, put together in a way that surfaces the solution you're looking for. And the other piece is, and it was something Frode was alluding to, is that if you're in a closed system, there's no adoption, right?
Yes.
Half of it is, this is what I want it to do, and look, I built something that'll do it. The other half is, oh, it's not actually connected to the rest of the real world. And somewhere in that connection, the confluence of those two things is trying to find systems that are in place that you can piggyback onto, right? Almost like a symbiotic relationship in nature, where you can get the benefits of infrastructure that's in place and achieve the effects that you're looking for using, you know, systems that you're co-opting for new purposes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I know it's a huge topic. I mean, the clipboard was just an example. Perhaps my topic, it's even bigger. The problem is that in general, when we think about computer systems, not in terms of systems but environments. So there is one trend in software engineering. It's called software environmentalism. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but Tudor Giba is doing some work of this. So we have it's what they build is actually they improved upon the Smalltalk system so that you have many different kinds of representations and so that you can navigate through complex systems. You have many kinds of aids. But the problem I'm seeing is that when I interact with computer systems, you have so many possibilities, but the problem is you don't have coherence. Everything you have to work, as I said, with different kinds of applications. And really, when I want to manipulate something, there might be many different kinds of representations. Might be also drawing a sketch, for instance. I mean, that's a very painful process on the computer, and that's why I prefer paper, to be honest. And you always seem to lack that kind of also of interface that you really need to produce an artifact or even create your own world. And so I think really my goal, and this much more difficult, is to have somehow a system in place that at least gives you the illusion that you're interacting with a coherent environment. I actually don't really have applications, but processes that supply interfaces to you that anticipate, hey, you're doing, for instance, it might be a sketch, but it could be also part of the simulation, and it would come up with all kinds of the methods, also the processes that you need. And I know that's a big thing, but to me the problem is, I mean, it's I can't exist that way. I mean, either I abandon technology. Well, not completely, but I've already thought about leaving the field of computing because it seems to be getting me nowhere, and I just can't deal with that kind of fragmentation that we are having. And yeah, I know it's a really tough issue, and any perspective, is
so I think what Frode said about the Cambrian, like we're at this point of a Cambrian explosion. I mean, I think you're seeing that, but part of that is that, remember that the Cambrian explosion was actually a competition.
I can hear you.
Right? Hey, awesome. But it was a competition, and members were eliminated. And so if we're going through that same kind of technological explosion and exploration, there's going to be a lot of stuff that appears there's two big things I want to highlight. One is a lot of stuff is going to get destroyed and eliminated. It just is. But remember that the remnants of what's destroyed may actually be repurposed for completely different things. the other point I wanted to highlight is that your instinct on the clipboard is I think very appropriate, because you're looking, like literally looking for, where is my communication nexus?
Sorry, I have,
Yeah, right.
And I won't be back for a while, so I have to close this channel. Can you guys exchange some kind of details in text so you can continue? Just type something, email address or something. Just on the whole Cambric explosion, yes, it was a competition, but it was also cooperation.
Yes.
You know, as the cells managed to connect to make bigger stuff. So it'll be a mess, but without that, you just have stagnancy, right?
Yes.
Right. Did you manage to communicate, email or something to each other?
David, I'll send you my email address, and I think we could set up a Zoom meeting.
Well, I can also invite you to Google Meet.
Have you managed to copy the David?
I've got his email. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go then. I'm afraid we have to do this. Sorry, it should be a better medium where you actually, when you all leave, don't you think it'll turn itself off?
This one? Yes. You go ahead and leave. Let's see what happens. I have your email, and I'll send you something.
Okay. Okay. All right. I will cancel it for today, so we keep it within the time space. But look forward to later. Thank you, guys.
All right.